Okay, folks, it's election day. And I mean election day on the bean farm. So let's find out what's going on. I think we're all tense. This is really, passions are running high. So let's continue with Freddy the Politician by Walter R. Brooks. Chapter 13. Although feelings had run pretty high on both sides, it was on the whole a good-natured crowd that gathered in the barnyard on election day. The animals formed in a long line to enter the voting place. Inside were Freddy, Jinx, and Mrs. Wiggins, representing the Farmers' Party, and the three woodpeckers, representing the Equality Party. Marcus, who called himself the Opportunity Party for no very good reason, since he hadn't thought up any opportunity to offer, represented himself, and had Simon with him. The rabbit was rather subdued and nervous, but old Simon seemed in the best of spirits and kept grinning wickedly to himself. The first animal to vote was one of the field mice, who had sat up all night in order to be at the head of the line. "Name?" said John Quincy. "Winthrop," said the mouse. "Address?" "Hayloft, Bean Farm." "Anybody here to answer for this animal?" asked John Quincy. "I can," said Freddy. "He lives here." "Very well," said John Quincy, and he handed the mouse 3 pieces of paper, one with a G, one with a W, and one with an M. "Go into the box stall," John Quincy instructed him, "and drop the paper with the initial of the candidate you want to vote for into the feed box in the corner. Then bring the other 2 pieces of paper out with you and drop them into this barrel." So the mouse went into the stall, and the next voter, an oriole named W.F. Jessup, stepped forward. He gave his address as Twin Maples, Upper Pasture, Bean Farm, and when X had vouched for him, he followed the mouse. And so the voting went on. By noon, 800 votes had been cast, and as they were beginning to run out of ballots, fresh sets of 3 had to be made up out of the discarded ones in the barrel. By 2 o'clock, the last vote had been cast. It was the 1161st. "Now," said Grover, "we'll count 'em." They rolled the barrel of discarded ballots outside so they couldn't get mixed up with the others, and brought in the feed box. The ballots were dumped out on the floor, and the animals began busily sorting them into piles. After 10 minutes or so, when Freddy had 34 W's and 22 G's in front of him, he looked up. "Oh, my goodness," he said. "I just thought—" Then he stopped. "Good gracious," he said to himself, and looked. Mrs. Wiggins and Jinx both had 2 piles in front of them, but the woodpeckers and Marcus and Simon each had 3 piles, all about equal in size. Freddy went over and whispered to Jinx and Mrs. Wiggin, and then he said, "Wait a minute." They all looked up, and Simon snickered. "I just want to see how we're getting on," said Freddy. "Grover, how many have you got now? We'll want to send out a preliminary bulletin. All the voters are waiting out there in the barnyard." "I have 12 for Wiggins, 26 for Marcus, and 19 for myself," said Grover. "You actually believe that 26 animals voted for Marcus?" asked Freddy. "There are 26 M's," said the woodpecker. "I gather from that 26 animals voted for him." "But those aren't M's," said Jinx, looking over Grover's shoulders. "They're W's." "Looks like an M to me," said Grover. "Come, let's get on with the count." "No," said Mrs. Wiggins firmly. "We'll get this decided right now. I see what your plan was, Grover, in persuading Marcus here to run. You could take my W votes and read them upside down, and of course they're M's. Then a lot of the votes that ought to be counted for me would be counted for Marcus, and you'll have more votes than I would. Actually, probably the only vote cast for Marcus was the one he cast for himself." "Oh, I voted for him, for one," said Simon with his oily smile. "I don't believe you," said Mrs. Wiggins. "But suppose you did. There's 2 votes for you, Marcus. And actually, how many animals actually promised to vote for you?" "Well, now, the rats did," said Marcus, twisting his paws and rolling his eyes in embarrassment. "And there was, let me see—" "You can't tell by asking Marcus," interrupted Grover. This was a secret vote, and for all you know, hundreds of animals may want Marcus for president. I must say it looks like it, and although I am surprised, I cannot but accept the fact." "Yeah," said Jinx, "you can accept it if you want to, but I won't." "Well, you'll just have to," said Grover calmly. "The animals can vote for whoever they want to." "That's true," said Freddy suddenly, "and as a matter of fact, I heard a lot of talk about wanting Georgie for president. I do believe that all of these G's I counted for Grover are really votes for Georgie. 3/4 of them, at least." Mrs. Wiggins and Jinx nodded solemnly in agreement and began dividing their G's into 2 piles. John Quincy and X both began shouting at once, but Grover raised a claw and silenced them. "Very well," he said, "count them as you wish, but I shall have nothing further to do with this election. Come, boys." And he and the other 2 woodpeckers left the barn. "I guess he won't have anything further to do with this election," said Jinx. "Not if we could get an honest count, and not if it keeps on the way it's going. We're way ahead so far." But Simon, who had moved quietly toward a dark corner of the barn, said suddenly, I protest against this high-handed action. It is dishonest and unfair, and I shall take this matter before the people of the Republic. You'll take it out of here before I tie a bow knot in your tail," said Jinx, and he made a leap for him, but the rat had vanished. "By gum," said Jinx, staring into the corner, "there's a rat hole here. Now, when was that done? We had all those stopped up 2 years ago." Simon and his gang have been around a lot lately," said Mrs. Wiggins. "That's one of the first things we have to attend to after the election." "See here, Mrs. Wiggins," said Marcus, "I don't want you to think I had anything to do with this cheating. I just thought it would be fun to run for president. Only, of course, I knew nobody would vote for me. But then Simon came to me, see, and, well, he made threats. You know, rats can do a lot of harm to rabbits. So when I found out what he was up to, I didn't dare say anything. But I didn't vote for myself, even. I voted for you. Honest, I did." Well, Marcus," said Mrs. Wiggins comfortably, "I wouldn't worry about that. We don't bear you any ill will. And don't worry about the rats, either. We'll take care of them." I'll fix that, Simon. You wait," said Marcus, who was beginning to recover his quite unrabbit-like daredevil spirit. A sudden burst of loud and prolonged cheering made them all look up. "What's that?" they asked each other. "What's going on?" And then Bertram's voice boomed out over the barnyard. "Ladies and gentlemen," he roared, "your new president is Grover." There was another frenzied cheer, and then the voice again. "But there has been trickery. The representatives of the Farmers' Party have deliberately cheated in counting the votes in order to elect their candidate. Yes, my friends, I know that it is difficult to believe that Mrs. Wiggins would lend her name to such a dishonest and shady transaction, but the facts cannot lie, even if the representatives of the Farmers' Party can." "Great guns!" said Jinx. "Outside, everybody! We've got to stop this!" And they rushed out into the great crowd of birds and animals that thronged the barnyard. "But have no fear," Bertram went on. "Your new and duly elected president, Grover, has taken charge. If there is sedition, if there is rebellion, he will put it down with a firm claw." In the upper doorway of the barn, where Uncle Ben's workshop had been, Bertram was standing, with X and John Quincy perched on his shoulders. "It's Grover," said Freddy. "He's running Bertram. We got to get him out of there. Come on." So Freddy and Jinx and the 2 dogs ran back into the barn, while Mrs. Wiggins, who couldn't have got up the stairs anyway, stayed in the barnyard to try to quiet the crowd. Her supporters rallied loyally around her, but she was unable to make herself heard by them, for even her loudest voice was not strong enough to overpower Bertram's bellow. In 3 minutes, the 2 parties had lined up on either side of the barnyard, and it looked as if there was about to be a pitched battle. But Mrs. Wiggins stepped into the open space between them. "I doubt if Mrs. Wiggins ever appeared more truly heroic than at that moment. Ordinarily the most peace-loving of a peace-loving race, when she had pledged herself to a cause which she thought right, she was capable of taking a firm stand even in the face of the most determined opposition. Few other cows, I am certain, would have cared to address that angry mob. Fortunately, she was able to address them and be heard, for Bertram was for the moment engaged with the 4 animals who had run upstairs to attack him. "Stop!" she shouted. "There must be no more fighting. We can settle our differences without that." And then, as both sides appeared to be willing to at least hear what she had to say, she began to explain about the votes. But halfway through her explanation, an outburst of barking and an angry screeching came from the loft, and then out through the air sailed Jinx. He landed on his feet beside Mrs. Wiggins, just as the 2 dogs, snarling and barking angrily, came tumbling down the stairs. "He got Freddy!" gasped Robert. "Threw Jinx out the door and grabbed Freddy and tied him up." Just then Bertram came again to the upper door. "Be calm, my friends," he roared. "The welfare of the FAR is still in the hands of its duly elected president. An attempt on my life, made by certain members of the Farmers' Party, who seem unwilling to abide by the results of our election, has happily been foiled. I have seized the chief conspirator, one Freddy, a pig, and am holding him as hostage for the good behavior of the others." A roar went up from the barnyard, of applause from one side, of anger from the other. "But he can't do that!" exclaimed Emma. "Goodness me, it's unheard of." "I don't know what Mr. Bean'd say to such goings-on," said Hank. "'Fraid he'd be dreadful angry. Guess I'd better climb them stairs and see what's what with that bird. Though I don't know if I can get up 'em. Well, I can try." Wait, Hank," said Mrs. Wiggins. "Even a horse can't fight Bertram. He's strong as 7 horses. We've got to get Grover out of Bertram some way. How did he ever learn to run him?" "Well, I showed him," said Ronald. "I've showed lots of animals and birds. We never thought anything like this would happen." "Of course you didn't," said Robert. "He even knows that the right arm does funny things, though, for Bertram didn't use it. He tied up Freddy with his left hand." "Well, we can't fight him," said Mrs. Wiggins. "We'd better talk to Grover and see what he intends to do. Perhaps that will give us some idea of how to get him out of there." "I'll talk to him with a hoof in the middle of his tail feathers," said Hank angrily, and the others all looked at him in astonishment, for nobody had ever seen Hank really angry before, even under the most trying of circumstances. "We'll get you your chance," said Mrs. Wiggins dryly, and then turning to the members of the Farmers' Party, she begged them to go quietly to their homes. "When I need you," she said, "I'll send for you. I don't think it'll be very long, but in the meantime, go quietly about your business as you do every day, and above all, don't quarrel with anyone on the other side. If we have to fight, we'll fight, but we'll let them start it, and then be ready for them. That's the best policy." Oh, Lord. Things are insane on the bean farm, and I can only hope that our own election night does not go like that.